Hey everyone, Dr. Frunky here with a review and final diagnosis on the Shirogorov knives and Sinkevich collaboration, the Sigma. This knife was a very exciting announcement to me because when I saw that this knife was coming out, it was right around the same time that I picked up or was looking at picking up my first Shirogorov. That knife ended up being this F3 right here, which I actually have really loved. I called it one of my top 5 knives in my final diagnosis for it. It is just a perfect mix of form and function, and I intend to make an F3 a permanent part of my collection. Now, the Sigma here differs from the F3 in an obvious number of ways, but I can't help but feel like the Sigma was really made almost like an advanced version of the F3. I really enjoy the carbon fiber sort of liner lock setup here, and they've sort of emulated that there, but taken it to the next level. I've mentioned in a few of my Instagram posts that this knife really feels like alien technology or future technology, like an F3 from the year 3018, and it's just a really cool knife. So let's go ahead and figure out what we're looking at here. Let's get some vital signs on this knife. Up front, we are looking at a very large blade of about 4 inches, 4.1 inches back to the handle right there. 4 inches of cutting length. Back to the pivot, you're looking at about 4.5 inches. Overall handle length is right at 5 inches with an effective grip area at 4.4 inches. Your overall length is coming in at about 9.1, 9.2 inches. It's a very large knife. So I had the F3 out here. For those of you knowledgeable in Shirogorovs, you will see what's going on there. Right here is a Spyderco Paramilitary 2 and a Paramilitary 3. So you can see this is a very large knife. I'll bring out another large production knife right here. How about a Zero Tolerance 0920? Now that's a big 4-inch knife, but the Shiro is still bigger than that knife. So very impressive size. What I'm mostly impressed by is the ability to pack such a huge blade into a relatively small handle. The design of this knife allows that tip to go all the way out to the edge of that handle, so there's almost no wasted space whatsoever. Why don't we go ahead and break this knife down anatomically and see what we're looking at. Up front is a beautifully done blade in M390 steel. This is one of the only knives I've ever seen come from the factory with a mirror polished edge on M390. I don't know if I'm capturing it here. Maybe I can get, there you go. See the tip of the blade there and how the light reflects off of it? It has an almost, it really is a mirror polished edge on this knife, and it is unbelievably sharp. This is even sharper than my F3 came. That F3 had a bit more of a toothy edge, which works really nicely. But the quality going on here on that edge is just spectacular. I'm going to catch the light in these reflective rays. It goes all the way up and down that whole blade, and there is no inconsistency to the sharpness. Obviously, the full flat ground blade works beautifully. This actually reminds me a bit of a really high-end Spidey Chef. This blade shape is very reminiscent of the Spidey Chef, and that's a good thing. That is a very functional blade shape, and it worked really nicely. Now, I never put this knife through its paces. I really didn't hard use this knife in any meaningful way because this is a very high-end knife. It's more of a collector's piece, and that will factor into the overall final diagnosis. But this is a perfectly functional blade. If you were to decide to use this as an EDC, it would work fantastically. I have used it to cut through food. I've used it to cut a lot of paper. I tried it on cardboard once gently, and it's just magical. It works really nicely. Very happy with that blade. It's easy to deploy there, so we'll go ahead and talk about that deployment. This is probably the most controversial part of this knife. It's the flipper tab and the deployment here. Really, the flipper tab and the detent. A lot of people have complained that the detent on this knife is too weak. I'll go ahead and demonstrate here. Oh, there we go. If I just shake it a little bit in the right direction, it will release from the handle. Now, in most use, like if I'm shaking it like this, it's not going to come out. But if you get it at just the right angle, sometimes it will come out. There it goes. That came out. In any case, some people have complained that that's not very safe, but I've seen much worse than that out there. Let me just go ahead and bring out my Gareth Bull Knives Chamois and just, yeah, that just comes out immediately. There's no detent on that almost. So this one is very light, but it's not something that's a deal breaker for me. I don't think that it's a dangerously light detent, but it's necessary because this also has the smallest darn flipper tab in the whole world. And that is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because from a design perspective, it hides that flipper tab and it just makes it very discreet, and it doesn't take away from the design of the blade. It also allows it to function as sort of a forward guard right there, so that's a nice addition. But this very small flipper tab is a little bit more difficult to engage than a larger flipper tab. I noticed that I missed a lot of times, and sometimes early on I would only halfway deploy the knife. It's easy to not get a grip on it. In order to compensate for that, they've put a lot of jimping on there, and so it is a little bit uncomfortable the first few times that you're flipping the knife. For the first few days, you certainly feel you have that new knife sort of finger going on until you get used to it. Now that I've done this for quite a few weeks now, I feel that that's a very easy deployment. It's certainly more of a light switch where you just pull back on the knife. You can push button it, but it's a much better light switch motion right there. You get a much more satisfying thwack. And on the multi-row bearing system, which you can see should be written maybe right, that says M390. MRBS is going to be written right here. So super nice. You can see the MRBS and the M390 written on the inside. That's very cool. The multi-row bearing system is unbelievably smooth, as I'm sure you've seen. It's gotten even better since I got it. It just drops shut with absolutely no effort. This is not a particularly heavy blade. It's very thinly ground and there's not a lot of material, but this just falls freely under its own weight with a very, very smooth, consistent, and predictable motion. I've really enjoyed the custom pivot hardware right there. It is absolutely beautiful. I will say a big negative for me is the proprietary hardware. Some folks said that I could use a Torx driver to take it apart, but I really don't have any intention of taking this knife apart. Again, we'll talk about that. Oh, there we go. I missed it. In the sort of final diagnosis segment there, I missed it again even. Moving back to the handles, this is done in beautiful, beautiful, full thickness carbon fiber. These big pieces of carbon fiber have been beautifully, beautifully milled externally. So there is some nice, so I don't want to call it seashell patterning. This is why I call it futuristic. There are just all these lines running through the carbon fiber. And no two are the same. No two of them match. They're these beautiful little pathways. And they're just absolutely stunning. So not only is it 3D milled, but there's a 3D pattern on the surface, and it's just a spectacular display of manufacturing tolerances and quality. Speaking of that, there is this full-length backspacer done in blue anodized titanium. It's quite beautiful. You can see the little edge of it sticking out over that hole back there. You can see the integrated lanyard loop on the back. Very, very nicely done. The pocket clip, to me, works very, very nicely. Some people reported having a very stiff one. Mine actually is quite light. I barely have to move it, and so it worked really, really nicely. Something I missed on the first video is that underneath the clip are actually 2 screws. I didn't know this when I did the unboxing, but those are actually the screws that secure the subframe lock in there. So we can talk about the subframe lock here. This is the only piece of metal in the handle, and it's a piece of titanium that's bolted to the carbon fiber back here. There is a steel lock bar insert hidden inside of there, so it is steel on steel at the lock interface. And it is just very, very nice. The lockup is secure. It's super early, but it's not so early that it seems dangerous. It's never come disengaged. And this will never see any hard use, so I'm not really worried about it becoming disengaged. So what do I think about this knife? What is my final diagnosis? Well, I'm going to call this a Spectator's Shirogorov. And that's because this knife is so nice and so limited to only 200 pieces worldwide that it's never going to see hard use. One of the things I love about my F3 is that it is actually the most perfect user knife. One of the most perfect user knives I've ever experienced. The blade, everything about it is just screams user. And I don't get that from the Sigma. The little nuances of the small flipper, the light detent, and the overall collectability of the knife means that I'm not going to keep it around. So I'm going to move both of these knives, and I'm actually going to consolidate to get a multi-row bearing F3. Just to see what that's like. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think of the Shirogorov Sigma down in the comments below. Click like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Instagram at Dr. Frunky, and take care.